Hello everyone, welcome to today's dramatic reality. Our protagonist Nick is quite unlucky as he decides to sneak into a famous Coca hospital to track down the truth. As a doctor, Nick knows the hospital well. After a detective game, he sneaks into the janitor's room, steals an employee badge, and transforms into a medical worker. That night, Nick swaggers into the Coca doctor's office with his badge, boldly opens the computer, living his best acting life. But there are many patients with prosthetic right arms here. Nick, relying on his memory, narrows it down to some suspects. Once he narrows it down, it drops to 21 people. Based on his info, one of those 5 might just be the killer hiding in plain sight. Without hesitation, Nick prints out the relevant info and makes a clean getaway in the noise of cleaning, and the next steps in his investigation are just around the corner. Old White rushes to Nick's old hospital for intel from co-workers. Sister refuses to share any clues about Nick with police. Other colleagues agree that Nick is totally innocent because, let's face it, he's a caring doctor who would never commit such a dastardly act. But soon enough, the cops trace him when the landlord's son slips up while selling Viking drugs. The landlord's son blurts out at the station Nick's fugitive status. Old White finds Nick's place, uncovering his fake ID tied to the Coca hospital. He was puzzled about Nick until he encounters a disabled person at the hospital, realizing Nick is looking into his late wife Laura's case. Nick checks the list, pretending to be hospital staff. The first suspect is quickly eliminated. He's deceased. The second suspect is in jail for armed robbery, and Nick is hell-bent on uncovering the killer's truth, even risking a visit to the slammer. Old White realizes Nick's impersonation aims to get the armored patient list and will visit them. Nick, through those crucial details of age and right arm prosthetics, finds over 40 matching patients, a true masterclass in sleuthing. Cross-referencing records, they find a patient in prison. As Nick enters, guess who arrives? Old White. However, Nick immediately realizes this person is not who he's after, as he definitely looks different. Feeling uneasy, Nick decides it's time to make a run for it and opts for the stairs. Funny enough, Old White is also making his way upstairs. On a two-way stairs, Nick and Old White pass, and Old White instantly recognizes the familiar figure. Old White's gut tells him that figure was Nick. He starts to hunt for evidence and, surprise, surprise, he's right. Nick senses Old White's arrival and knows he has to make a quick exit, while Old White is hot on his trail. The two chase from the staircase to the main hall where Nick, looking to buy time, lies to the guard that armed pursuers are on his tail. Old White is baffled, not knowing guards' intent. His men flash badges. They finally realize and prepare to nab Nick. Old White orders guards to shut the door, but Nick bolts out at the last second. Furious, Old White fires, hitting bulletproof glass. Nick makes a narrow escape, while Old White can only watch in dismay as Nick slits through his fingers yet again. By the time Old White and the crew burst out, Nick has vanished into a crowd celebrating, and the case begins to garner media attention. Focusing on Nick's daring return to the media speculates on his return motives, while Old White trusts Nick, thinking he's innocent. After all, no one's stupid enough for such a risk. Judicial Officer Old White is speechless. Nick continues to check the next patient on the list, but the phone is out of service. Frustrated, he has no choice but to sneak into the patient's home. Through a photo, Nick identifies the killer, physique, gaze, and prosthetic match. To his shock, this guy used to be a cop. In the killer's locker, Nick discovers some photos. Plus, Nick uncovers a bombshell. The killer is connected to Eric, the guy hosting the party. Eric is the big boss at the pharmaceutical company. They all stop at nothing to sell their drugs and are buddy-buddy with. During a surgery, Nick took over a lung infection patient on Eric's new medication. They advertised their drug as a miracle cure for blood clots, but the side effects could be lethal. Nick planned to report findings, but his wife was killed. He realizes he was targeted. The puppet master is Eric. To expose the truth, Nick calls police claiming innocence. The police quickly track and arrest him. When the police arrive, Old White realizes Nick lured them here, but Nick is already long gone. The homeowner insists to Old White that he doesn't know Nick and claims Nick is trying to frame him. This former officer retired after an injury and switched careers to become the safety supervisor at Eric's drug corporation. However, Old White notices doctors in the photos know Nick, but he spots Dr. AJ. Orders his men to keep an eye on him. Old White himself tracks down AJ for questioning, but AJ claims he doesn't recognize the killer and just went on the vacation trip. AJ soon gets a call from Nick, told the truth, but ironically, Eric's head passed away in an accident. Nick finds this suspicious, sensing someone else is pulling the strings, and suddenly he knows exactly who it is. At this point, Nick doesn't realize he's being hunted. The killer is tailing him closely until Nick starts to feel something's off. The cops notice Nick and plan to arrest him, but the killer intervenes and decisively eliminates the cop. Terrified, Nick immediately yanks the train's emergency brake, and boy, does that grab everyone's attention.